So, mentorship. Elaine asked me to talk about my experience of being a mentee. It's not a nice word, mentee. It means somebody who is mentored. I'm going to ramble slightly more widely than that, as I tend to do. So if you go to Professor Google, who is, let's admit it, our first stop for all bits of information, and you put in mentoring in image, you start off with something like this, which is full of warm and cuddly words. And then it gets a bit more bizarre, because then you get pictures of cartoons inappropriately touching each other. And then finally you get one of a man with a watering can coming out of his head. So I've always found the idea of mentorship and trying to explain it and what it means and how it's helped me rather difficult. Luckily, there's an organisation called the Academy of Medical Sciences, which is an organisation of the academic medical great and good. And you're made to feel very, very, very important if you become a fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences. I hasten to add, I'm not. But they've put a lot of time and effort into establishing mentorship programs, mainly aimed at the sort of clinical lecturer and above level, but what they say could apply throughout your career, both as a clinical academic or indeed just as a clinician. And there's lots of definitions of what a mentor is. I suppose the simplest and nicest one I like is the third one down. Mentors are people who, through their action and work, help others to achieve their potential. It's simple, it's sort of pithy, but it is actually exactly what a mentor should do. In the world of mentorship, there's the old model of patronage and the slightly more up-to-date developmental model of mentorship. And most people's vision and image of what a mentorship is based on the old patronage model, which does involve starting with an old fart who then kindly allows you into their presence, at which they will sit and declaim and impart their infinite wisdom to you, sharing lifetime's experience, usually with very long and dull anecdotes. But the trouble with the patronage model is that old farts tend to pick younger farts who look quite like them, and it's not always clear who is benefiting from this relationship. And I have to say, most mentorship programs for a long time have been like that. The new world of mentorship is actually much more an interaction without hierarchy is how it's supposed to be. So it's actually the mentee who drives the agenda, not the mentor. It's you who drives the whole process. It's you who seeks out the advice. And it's about helping you self-develop. And I don't just mean you because you're more junior than me. It's applicable at any stage in your career, as I will show you. And it's also about confidence building, enabling us to make decisions that you are confident with about your career. So that's what mentorship is about. So what is a good mentor? So time is actually very important. Your mentor needs to give the time to you as their mentee so that they can listen to you. When I was first part of a mentorship program set up by the Academy of Medical Sciences, there were mentors who were saying, well, you can send me your CV and I may in about 4 months' time have time to see you. That's not a good mentorship program. So they need to listen and give you time. And they're there to support you, encourage you, and challenge you. Okay, why do you make this decision? Why are you doing this? What are you doing? And they're supposed to provide a framework to help you make the decisions that you want to make. They will share their experience. So, the endless anecdotes do occasionally have a sort of kernel of relevance to them. But it's about sharing relevant experience, not just kind of saying, oh, when I was at the Hammersmith in 1973, etc., etc. And clearly helping you go in the right direction to find the information and resources that you need, including maybe other people who may have very specific skills and expertise that you need. What a mentor is not a collaborator. It is not somebody you work with directly. It is not somebody who writes joint grants with you. It's not somebody whom you can phone up and say, I haven't got my promotion. Can you write a letter and say I'm a really nice person? As I said, they're not their referee. They're there to take one step back and help you and guide you. So, this is another good. a quotation from the Academy of Medical Sciences. A great mentor provides a stimulating sanctuary which enables people to take a helicopter view of their options. Probably not 35,000 feet, that's too high. You just want to be slightly above it so that you can just work out what it is that you're looking for. And mentoring obviously comes in several forms. I'll talk to you again about formal mentoring in a second, but that's clearly where an organisation says, we wish you to have a mentor and here is the process by which it's going to happen. And that's fine, and that can be very good, and it can work well. But often, obviously, informal mentoring, people that you meet and you find whom you may just have a sort of natural affinity with, that sort of informal mentoring can be incredibly productive. But of course, remembering the old fart seeks out young fart. Young farts can also look for old farts and look for people who look like them. And sometimes a formal system where you're put with somebody you may not necessarily automatically know can work well just because it gives a different perspective. There's the concept of spots mentoring. There's one very specific issue that you want some advice on, and you can just find somebody with that very specific bit of expertise, and that's fine. That may not be a long-term relationship, it could be for just one particular thing. And of course, peer mentoring is incredibly important. And if you like, this is peer mentoring in a room. You are all here together. And we all do it, and it's called going for a beer or whatever. But that is a form of peer mentoring. So who is the ideal mentor? Well, I suppose Yoda. Although he speaks complete gobbledygook and usually backwards. But he helps. It's a slightly tortured analogy, I know. But, you know, he's a wise person. He is old. He's got funny ears. He's a bit hairy, but he imparts wisdom and he challenges. And I suppose if you like, Yoda is a type of mentor figure. So what about my experience, which is what I was supposed to be talking about? So as I've intimated, I was allotted my first mentor when I was a clinician scientist for the first time about 18 years ago. And the Academy of Medical Sciences was just initiating its mentorship program for trainee clinical academics. And they provided us a list of, actually it's only about 7 or 8 people, and said, you're an oncologist, here's a bunch of oncologists who are happy to be mentors. And so I spoke to and had a mentorship relationship with Professor Bob Suhami, who at that point was the Professor of Oncology at UCL. Now, for those of you who don't know London geography, at the time I was working at the Hammersmith, which is at one end of the A40, and UCL is about 3 miles further east, and then Barts is about 3 miles further east, and the relevance of that will become apparent in a minute. Now, Bob Suhami clearly is a member of the great and the good. Here he is with his great friend Princess Anne, but he was also quite a wise man. And Bob and I would meet, 2 or 3 times a year, usually for coffee, and we would just natter about how things were going. And that was fine, but I particularly needed him to help me make a decision, and that was when my boss announced he was moving from institution A to institution B, and Bob at that moment happened to work in institution C, which is halfway between A and B. And we sat down for about an hour and a half in a Starbucks outside Holborn Tube Station, and he just let me talk about what it was I wanted to do, where my career was going. And he said, okay, tell me what's good about A, tell me what's good about B, what are you worried about? And he didn't make any decisions, he didn't impose anything, but he just helped me talk and go through the options. And in the end, I moved to Barts, and that was actually a very productive thing for me to do. But that was a really concrete example of using a mentor when I had a difficult decision. My boss at A clearly had an agenda, my boss at B clearly had an agenda, but somebody neutral in the middle, actually literally physically in the middle, was able to help me make that decision. Bob retired and hasn't been well, but so I now have a new, and this is an informal mentoring process. Stan Kay is actually my predecessor bar one as Professor of Oncology here in Glasgow, and has an interest in ovarian cancer. And Bob, if you like, Stan I have slightly picked as my informal mentor. And again, Stan comes up to Glasgow 3-4 times a year, and we meet for coffee. Coffee is quite central in my life, as Elaine will tell you. And we just sit and chew the fat, and he asks me how things are going, and he asks probing questions, and I don't want him to ask them because I know they're the questions I don't want to be asked, but I know they need to be. And we just sit and work out, or he helps me work out plans and gives me that helicopter view of where I am. And it's actually very helpful. So, final word, mentorship. Here's the McNeish checklist for mentorship. 1, your mentor is not your boss. Your current boss is not your mentor and never will be. Your mentor is impartial and should have no agenda. There's very few people who are truly impartial in everything and have no agenda, because everybody has an agenda. But you want somebody who is as impartial as possible, and they're not conflicted with the decisions that you're wanting to make. I believe they should be external to your organisation, as really one step removed. But if they can't be external to your organisation, they need to be external to your department, so you can have that one-step separation. And clearly, somebody whose advice you trust is incredibly important. Now, that trust can be built up as you get to know people, but if there's people you know already whose advice you trust, that's very helpful. I do believe mentorship things work best when you choose your own, but they can work well when the organisation devises a scheme. And wherever you are in your career, or indeed wherever you're going, I would advise you to find a mentor now, because it's a very helpful thing to do just for that decision-making process. So on that note, I'll stop, hand over, and then I can take some questions at the end. Thanks very much.